So the next thing I'm going to show you is actually really useful, which is how to freeze rows and columns. And again, a lot of people don't know how to do this, but supposing you're scrolling down, as you see, you've suddenly lost all the column heading. You don't know which month you're in. So you have to keep on coming up, seeing the month, and then down, and it's a bit of a nightmare really. So you want to learn how to freeze the column headings, and the same thing with the names on the left. So you just go to the first cell in the corner of the section where you want to be able to free to move around in. So in this case, you'd want, this is the first non-freezed cell you want to have. So just click there, then click on View, Freeze Panes. If you want to just freeze the rows, you can, or the columns, but most of the time you probably want to freeze both rows and columns at the same time. So click there, and as you see, it's added these slightly darker line there separating the cell to indicate where it's freezing it. These lines don't print out, the freeze lines, but it's just for your information. So now if you scroll down, you can see that the top 3 rows are frozen, and if you go to the right, the names are frozen. So it just makes it much more usable. A spreadsheet this size would just be impossible to use really unless you used frozen columns and rows. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just press home, and there, if you press home, it just goes to the top left hand corner of the unfrozen bit. So supposing that you then decided you didn't want to see these lines, these blank row and column at the top that we created. So the way to get rid of that on your screen but still keep them there, first you need to unfreeze, so click on freeze and then unfreeze. Now you have to just scroll so that they're not on the screen. So if I scroll down, so I'm there, and if I just push down arrow one more time, so that now is off the screen, and then if I go to the right, put 95, click one more time, and then that blank line is now off the screen. So now I go back to where I was and want to freeze panes. Now click on View, Freeze Panes, and there you go. It's same as it was before, but we don't have we can't see those that blank row and column.